welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to discuss the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 13 November 2018. The news to be discussed have been presented on the screen and time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Now let's start our today's discussion. The first news appears on page number 1 and also appears as a continuation on page number 10. Now this news is with respect to the submissions given by the central government on the entire Rafale deal in the Honorable Supreme Court amid alleged allegation of corruption by the opposition parties. In its submission, the government has stated that it has followed every possible procedure with respect to clearance of this particular Rafale deal. Now this particular topic in your prelims forms a part of current events of national importance. Now when you will go through the newspaper on Rafale deal on page number 1 and 10, you will come across these terms in the entire newspaper. These terms are Cabinet Committee on Security, Defence Procurement Procedure, that is DPP, Intergovernmental Agreement, IGA, as well as Defence Acquisition Council. So in this aspect, let us understand each of these keywords because these keywords becomes important from our exam perspective. Now, the Defence Procurement Procedure of 2013 mentions that any acquisition over rupees 1000 crore shall be first cleared by the Cabinet Committee on Security. So in this aspect, let's understand these different terms as highlighted in the newspaper. So considering the impact of Defence Procurement Procedure as well as Cabinet Committee on Securities and other cabinet committees, this topic forms a part of GS paper 2 not only under international relations since this is a deal between India and France, but also some of the aspects of polity, specifically with respect to these cabinet committees. And in your GS paper 3, this topic forms a part of indigenization of technology. So let's understand this entire issue of Rafale through this timeline as mentioned. So after the visit of our Prime Minister in France, a joint statement was issued both by India and France with respect to the purchase of Rafale aircrafts. On 13th May 2015, this particular deal was approved by the Defence Acquisition Council. Now after the approval by Defence Acquisition Council, an Indian negotiating team was formed and sent to France, and this Indian negotiating team submitted its report which was signed on 21st July 2016. So after the Indian negotiating team submitted its report on 21st July 2016, the Cabinet Committee on Security gave its approval for 36 Rafale jet, and this was exactly what was stated by the Government of India in its submission in the Honorable Supreme Court with respect to the procedures followed in terms of procurement of Rafale between India and France. The government in its submission also mentioned that the entire process of Defence Procurement Procedure of 2013 was completely followed. Since this is an ongoing case in the Supreme Court, so let's wait for the final verdict. However, with respect to these terms, let's understand first about the composition of various cabinet committees by the Government of India as on 10th March 2018. As of now, there are 6 cabinet committees. The first one is Appointments Committee headed by the Prime Minister. The next one is Cabinet Committee on Accommodation, but this committee is headed by the Home Minister. The third one is Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, and this is headed by the Prime Minister. The next one is Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, and this one is headed by the Home Minister. The fifth one is Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs, and this is headed by the Prime Minister. And the sixth one is Cabinet Committee on Security, and this is also headed by the Prime Minister, as we have already seen in this particular news. So in this aspect, it becomes important to remember about Cabinet Committee on Accommodation, which is headed by the Home Minister, as well as Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs. This is also headed by the Home Minister. So various prelims questions can be formed on this particular information with respect to which of the following cabinet committees are either headed by the Prime Minister or not headed by the Prime Minister. So in this aspect, one must remember that Cabinet Committee on Accommodation is headed by the Home Minister, whereas Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs is headed by the Home Minister. And the rest 4 cabinet committees are headed by the Prime Minister, that is Appointments Committee, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs, as well as Cabinet Committee on Security. Now next, let us understand about this Defence Acquisition Council, that is DAC. Now DAC is the decision making body of the Ministry of Defence. It accords in principle the capital acquisition in the long-term perspective for various defense deals. And the decision of Defense Acquisition Council is to be implemented by the following three boards, namely Defense Procurement Board headed by the Defense Secretary, Defense Production Board headed by the Secretary Defense Production, and Defense Research and Development Board. And this is headed by Secretary of Defense Research and Development. Further, a Defense Acquisition Wing headed by the Director General of Acquisition has also been created to assist the Defense Procurement Board in its functioning. So after understanding the Defense Acquisition Council, let us also understand certain basics with respect to defense procurement procedure. Now, defense procurement procedure mainly focuses on institutionalizing, streamlining, as well as simplifying the defense procurement procedure. The defense procurement procedure shall cover all capital acquisitions undertaken by the Ministry of Defense, Defense Services, as well as the Indian Coast Guard. However, the DRDO, that is Defense Research and Development Organization, Ordnance Factory Board, and Defense Public Sector Undertakings shall continue their own procurement procedure. Now, Ministry of Defense has come up with a new defense procurement procedure of 2016 after a report was submitted by the Committee of Experts headed by Shri Dhirendra Singh. Now, this committee was appointed to evolve a policy framework to facilitate Make in India program of the government in defense manufacturing, and also to align the policy evolved during the defense procurement policy of 2013 with the current defense procurement procedure of 2016. The committee was also suggested to suggest measures to remove bottleneck in the procurement process and also to simplify and rationalize various steps related to defense procurement. Thus, with the Defense Procurement Policy of 2016, the MAKE procedure has also been refined to ensure increased participation from the Indian industry. Thus, the committee, in order to promote indigenous design and development of defense equipment, has introduced the By Indigenously Designed, Developed and Manufactured category, that is IDDM category, and also accorded it topmost priority. The IDDM category is expected to bring significant investment in the defense sector with respect to research and development and also cutting edge technology. So in this analysis, we went briefly through the timeline with respect to whatever has happened in terms of defense procurement of Rafale jet. We also went through the 6 cabinet committees, some of which are headed by the Prime Minister and some of which are headed by the Home Minister. Then we also tried and understand about the Defense Acquisition Council. And finally, we also tried and understand about the defense procurement procedure. And in this aspect, we also understood that the Dhirendra Singh committee has submitted its report on the basis of which the Ministry of Defense has approved the defense procurement procedure of 2016. Now, these are the 3 practice questions with respect to the analysis based on this particular news. The first one is with related to cabinet committees. The second is with respect to Defense Acquisition Council. And the third is with respect to Defense Procurement Procedure 2016. I hope after going through this discussion, you'll be easily able to solve these questions. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news is about a concept known as disguised unemployment, and you can find this on page number 9. Now, this disguised employment is also at times referred to as hidden unemployment. Now, this is a kind of unemployment in which a person who is employed in any job is not utilized for the production of goods or services. In other words, such employment does not contribute to the output in an economy. Now, at times, this kind of disguised unemployment can also be a form of underemployment. Thus, these kind of underemployment, where skills are not utilized to their maximum capacity, also leads to a decline in output. And hence, it is considered to be a form of hidden unemployment. For example, in India, agriculture sector employs 49% of India's workforce. However, this agricultural sector contributes only around 14% to India's GDP. Thus, we can assume that there is a lot of disguised unemployment in the agricultural sector in India. This form of disguised unemployment in the agricultural sector in India can be attributed to the lack of opportunities in other sectors, where the surplus labor can be employed profitably. It is in this aspect that this concept of disguised unemployment becomes important to understand, specifically with respect to the agricultural sector in India, as it is the agricultural sector which has the most hidden unemployment in India because of lack of opportunities in other sectors. where they can be employed. This topic forms a part of economy, and basic questions based on these concepts at times are asked by UPSC. So in that aspect, this concept of disguised unemployment becomes very important. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 13. The news reads, RBI unlikely to open window for NBFCs, and NBFCs should explore other options. Now, this news is with respect to the liquidity crunch being faced by these NBFCs, that is, non banking financial companies, due to which they have defaulted on their debt obligations on the commercial papers. In your prelims examination, this forms a part of Indian economy, and in your mains, it forms a part of GS paper 3. So, with respect to the debt obligation on commercial papers, let us first understand about the basics on commercial papers. Now, these commercial papers are unsecured short-term money market instruments which are issued in the form of promissory note. Now, these commercial papers can be issued by corporates, primary dealers, as well as financial institutions. And these commercial papers can be issued for maturities between a minimum of 7 days till a maximum of 1 year from the date of issue. So it is on these commercial papers that these NBFCs have defaulted on their debt obligations. Now, because of these defaulting obligations of NBFCs, the RBI, that is Reserve Bank of India, has come under great pressure from the Government of India to open a special window for these NBFCs, that is non-banking financial companies, as well as housing finance companies, so as to ease their liquidity requirements. However, this move of opening a special liquidity window by the Government of India has been opposed by the Reserve Bank of India. Thus, the issue of liquidity crunch as well as the transfer of surplus reserves from RBI to the Government of India has become a cause of friction between the RBI and the central government. So in this aspect, let us understand why is RBI opposing this special window to ease out the liquidity aspect of these NBFCs and housing companies. The RBI is unlikely to open a special window to enhance liquidity for these NBFCs and housing companies. However, the RBI will continue providing funds to the banking system, as this would address the liquidity concerns in the economy. Now, the reason for not opening a special window is that the RBI believes that bigger NBFCs that have better ratings from credit rating agencies are not facing any such liquidity crisis. Whereas it is the mid-sized NBFCs as well as the housing financing firms who are facing these liquidity crises. Thus, the RBI in this aspect believes that those NBFCs who are facing financial crunch or liquidity crisis must explore other options before coming to RBI. So in this aspect, let us also understand what are these other options available to such NBFCs facing liquidity crisis. Now, with respect to other options, these NBFCs facing liquidity crunch can avail refinancing facility from SIDBI, that is Small Industries Development Bank of India, as well as National Housing Bank. Further, these NBFCs are also allowed to sell their loans to the banks. So it is in this aspect to improve or ease the liquidity, the National Housing Bank has recently increased its refinancing limit to 30,000 crore. And in this aspect, even the State Bank of India has increased the loan purchase target from NBFCs to rupees 45,000 crore. And this increment has been done for the current financial year. So the RBI is of the view that these NBFCs facing liquidity crunch must avail for other options before coming to RBI. So in this aspect, this entire news which says that RBI is unlikely to open window for NBFCs becomes very important to understand in the ongoing financial crisis which these NBFCs are currently facing with respect to liquidity crunch. In this aspect, it's important to know that SIDBI was established through an Act of Parliament, that is Small Industries Development Bank of India Act 1989. And SIDBI was established as a principal financial institution for promoting, financing, as well as development of MSME sector, that is micro, small and medium enterprises sector. And in this aspect, it's also important to know about SIDBI Vision 2, which is a strategic initiative by SIDBI aimed at accelerating their effort to transform their current role to that of an all India financial institution, which can further help in creating an integrated credit and development support ecosystem for Indian MSEs. and also promoting their inclusive growth. It says that this initiative, that is SIDBI Vision 2, is dedicated to meet both credit as well as non-credit needs of MSCs, thereby enabling them to become globally competitive, where the SIDBI 2 vision is designed to bring about sustainable development of this sector based on 3 P's, that is profit, people as well as planet. So in this aspect, this information on SIDBI as well as Vision 2 of SIDBI becomes important for the sustainable and inclusive growth of the MSME sector. Thus, this news on RBI unlikely to open window for NBFCs becomes extremely important for us to understand from our examination point of view. Now, this question on commercial papers forms your fourth practice question. It mentions about basic information with respect to commercial papers. I hope after going through this discussion, you will be able to solve this particular question on commercial papers. The next news appears on page number 14. The news reads, Abu Dhabi firm inks deal to store crude in India, oil to be stored at ISPRL's underground facility in Karnataka. In your prelims examination, this forms a part of Indian economy, and your mains, it forms a part of GS paper 3. Now in this particular news, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company as ADNOC has signed a Memorandum of Understanding with Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited. This MOU between ADNOC and ISPRL is basically to explore the possibility of storing crude of ADNOC at underground facilities of ISPRL at Padur in Karnataka. So in this aspect, let us understand certain basics with respect to strategic petroleum reserves. Now, to ensure energy security, the government of India has decided to set up a 5 million metric tons capacity of strategic crude oil storages at 3 locations. First is Vishakhapatnam, second is Mangalore, and third is Padur near Udupi in Karnataka. Now, these strategic storages will be in addition to the existing storage of crude oil as well as petroleum product which is available with the oil companies. And in case of any supply disruptions, these strategic storages will serve as a cushion or as an advantages with respect to India's petroleum reserve. Now, this construction of strategic crude oil storage facilities is being managed by ISPRL, that is Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited. Now, these crude oil storages are constructed in underground rock caverns, and these underground rock caverns are located on the western coast as well as on the eastern coast of India. Now, crude oil from these caverns are supplied to Indian refineries either through pipelines or through a combination of pipelines and ships. Now, in this aspect, these underground rock caverns are considered to be one of the safest means of storing these hydrocarbons. Thus, in this aspect, this information on strategic crude oil storage facilities becomes important from a prelims perspective, as questions may be asked with respect to these underground rock caverns as well as the fact that these are stored on the western coast as well as on the eastern coast. Now, this question on India's strategic petroleum reserve becomes your fifth practice question. After going through this discussion on India's strategic petroleum reserve, I hope you will be able to solve this particular question. The next news appears on page number 18. The news reads, Report sees climate risk from rise in Indian air conditioning units. It says that refrigerants are the major contributors to global warming. Now, this becomes a very important aspect with respect to general issues on environment as well as climate change. And in your mains, it forms a part of GS paper 3 under environmental pollution. So the news says that by the year 2022, India is expected to have a fourth of world's air conditioning units, and this is a very bad news with respect to global warming. Now, this will have a major impact on climate change as the refrigerants used in the cooling of air conditionings, that is HFCs, that is hydrofluorocarbon, are a major contributor to global warming. The news further says that if these air conditioning units expand like this, then they can cause global temperature to rise by at least 0.5 degrees Celsius. Thus, in this aspect, the Ministry of Science and Technology has instituted a new prize known as Global Cooling Prize, and this is to promote innovative cooling technologies that could reduce the impact of climate change and also to reduce the climatic impact of these residential air conditioning units by at least 5 times. So in this context, let us understand about the details with respect to the prize as announced by the Ministry of Science and Technology. So total prize money for this global cooling prize is worth US $3 million and this will be awarded over the course of 2-year competition. So this is a ongoing competition for 2 years. Further, as intermediate prizes, 10 companies will be shortlisted who support the design and prototype development of their innovative residential cooling technologies, and these companies who will be shortlisted will be awarded up to $2 lakh each. The winning technology will be awarded at least US $1 million and this will be done in order to support its incubation as well as early stage commercialization. Thus, such technologies which will help in reducing the impact of global warming will be awarded at least $1 million in order to support their incubation as well as their early stage commercialization. Now the question is, what is the need for these global cooling prize? It says that currently there are around 1.2 billion room air conditioning units which is in service around the world, and it is estimated that their number will increase to at least 4.5 billions by the year 2050. So this is almost a four-fold increase in the number of air conditioning units by the year 2050, and this will have a major impact on global warming. Thus, this competition will help these companies in finding better alternatives to the one which is used right now in these air conditioning units. It says that India alone will see over 1 billion air conditioning deployed in the market by the year 2050. Another need for this particular prize is the fact that refrigerants, as mentioned, that is HFCs, used for cooling are the major contributors to global warming, and they can cause global temperatures to rise by 0.5 degrees Celsius if they are left unchecked. Thus, this global cooling prize will help to promote innovative technologies to find alternatives with the one which are currently being used in the present air conditioning units. The next news appears on page number 2. The news reads, "No stones replaced at Konark Sun Temple as per the Archaeological Survey of India." Now in this particular news, let us understand about this Konark Sun Temple as well as the Nagara and the Dravida style of temple architecture, as a question has been asked in the year 2012 in the UPSC prelims examination. Now this topic forms a part of art and culture in your prelims examination, and in your mains it forms a part of GS paper 1. Now this particular question was asked in the year 2012. The question was, the Nagara, Dravida and the Vesara are the options were 3 main racial groups of Indian subcontinent, 3 main linguistic divisions into which languages of India can be classified, 3 main styles of Indian temple architecture, and 3 main musical gharanas prevalent in India. So to answer this question, let's go through the Nagara and the Dravida style of temple architecture. Now as you can see, this is the Dravida temple where we have a Viman as well as a Shikhar, and there is a Mandap. Now you can see this is the Nagara style of temple, and you can compare this with the Dravida temple. So where you can see the Shikhar is longer as compared to the Dravida temple, and there is also a Amlak and a Kalasha. However, in the Nagara style of temple architecture, there is no Gopuram. The similarities are that both these temples have Garbhagriha, as you can see in this particular picture. Now coming back to this question asked in the year 2012, now after coming to this question, you can easily answer that is Nagara, Dravida as well as Vesara, which is a mix of Nagara and Dravida style, is 3 main styles of Indian temple architecture. So in this, C was our correct answer. So after answering this, let's go through class 11 NCERT Fine Arts on chapter 6, which talks about Konark Sun Temple. Now NCERT book of class 11 in its chapter 6 on Fine Arts mentions about this Sun Temple at Konark. It says that the main architectural features of Orissa temples are classified in 3 orders, namely Rekhapida, Pidhadiul and Khakra. It says that most of the main temple sites are located in ancient Kalinga. Now this becomes very important, which currently is in modern Puri district, including Bhubaneswar or ancient Tribhubaneswar, Puri as well as Konark. So the 3 cities mentioned with respect to these temples are Bhubaneswar, Puri and Konark. It further says that the temples of Orissa constitute a distinct sub-style within the Nagara order. Now you can understand the Nagara style of temple architecture. It says that in general, the Shikhara is called the Deul in Orissa. So the Shikhar which is represented in a Nagara temple is called Deul in Orissa. It then says that Deuls are preceded as usual by Mandapas called Jagmohana in Orissa. So all these relevant facts from NCERT becomes very important from your prelims perspective. It further reads that the ground plan of the main temple is almost square, which in the upper reaches of its superstructure becomes circular in the crowning mastaka. And this makes the spire nearly cylindrical in its appearance as well as in its length. It then says that at Konark, on the shores of Bay of Bengal, lie the majestic ruins of Surya or Sun Temple. So this fact with respect to Konark, that it lies on the shores of Bay of Bengal, becomes very important. And this temple was built around 1240 AD. It then says that the Sun Temple is set on a high base, its walls covered in the extensive detailed ornamental carving, and these include 12 pairs of enormous wheels sculpted with spokes and hubs. And these wheels represents chariot wheels of the sun god, who in mythology rides a chariot driven by 7 horses. Now this again becomes important information. Thus the whole temple comes to a resemblance of a colossal processional chariot. Further, on the southern wall is a massive sculpture of Surya carved out of green stone. So all this information with respect to Konark temple becomes extremely significant from our prelims perspective. Now this question on Sun Temple at Konark becomes your 6th practice question. This question has given certain statements with respect to the temple. I am sure after going through the analysis you will be able to solve this question very easily. Now with respect to this temple architecture, it's very important to go through these NCERT books so as to better understand and have a clarity on different types of architecture. As we have just seen, that question was asked in the year 2012 with respect to the temple architecture. Thus, in this aspect, this particular news becomes significant with respect to understanding the architecture of this particular Konark temple. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 8 in the editorial section. It says, dangerous tactics. Recent attacks suggest that Maoists are focusing on greater militarization. Now this editorial is with respect to increase in attacks in Chhattisgarh by the Maoists to disrupt the ongoing elections. Now this topic in your mains examination forms a part of GS paper 3, specifically under challenges to internal security, as well as role of external state and non-state actors in creating challenges to internal security. Now this editorial highlights that there have been an increase in terms of attacks in Chhattisgarh by the Maoists, and the purpose is to disrupt the ongoing election. The article highlights that this increase in attack by the Maoists is because of a greater militarization of the banned Communist Party of India Maoist. Now these CPI Maoists tries to project themselves as the torchbearer of earlier Naxalbari movement by uniting farmers as well as workers against the Indian state in the Red Corridor. This editorial suggests that the CPI Maoist is waging a military battle to capture power rather than working through India's democratic institutions to ensure socio-economic upliftment of the tribals in the area. So in this aspect, let us understand certain basic facts with respect to the Red Corridor. Now Red Corridor is the region in the eastern, central as well as the parts of southern India which experience considerable Naxalite and Maoist insurgency. However, there has been a decrease in these Maoist and Naxalite insurgencies over the past few years. So this editorial effectively highlights the destruction caused by these Maoists, especially during the ongoing elections in Chhattisgarh. Now this issue of challenges to internal security becomes extremely important from our mains perspective. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.